Okay. So, have you guys finished yesterday's assignment?
Yeah, we did. Yes.
How did that go?
Actually, it went pretty good. I knew
Yeah.
I messed up on the third one because right after I handed it in, I knew I forgot to mention the oil fields.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll have to fix that.
Okay. Let's see. For the number 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Oil fields. What do you mean the oil fields?
So for like the Vietnam syndrome,
Yeah.
well, do you want me? I'll kind of like read what I said for 3, and then we can kind of talk about it.
Sure. I'd love to hear it.
So, Vietnam syndrome was people lost faith in the government and political leaders lost trust in their military. The U.S. citizens started to wonder why the U.S. government was getting involved in foreign affairs. This is connected to I don't know how to say the
It's
concept.
détente. It's a French word.
Détente.
Yeah.
Because of the definition of détente states that the easing of relations between countries and the U.S. Because the U.S. backed out of Vietnam and really just let communism take over the country rather than the U.S. step in further.
Mm-hmm.
So the citizens of the U.S. wanted to stop fighting because they were tired of fighting. Basically, we're not scared of any of the outcomes anymore. Meaning nobody was dumb enough to drop nuclear bombs because it would kill everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So the fighting and continuous military upgrades were pointless to the U.S. citizens. But so then the Soviets lived through the same conditions, but the USSR citizens were told that what to do rather than do what they wanted.
Yeah.
They were under the influence of communism. They were almost two identical superpowers with two very different points of view. That's kind of what I said.
No, that's an awesome response there. But how does the oil fields come into play there?
They wanted to, like, I don't know, kind of stop the domino effect from happening. And if it happened, it would have taken over some of the countries that had rich oil supply.
Oh, you're talking about number 2.
Was it number 2? Yeah, it was number 2.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, like, what was the ulterior motive? Like, right? You're talking about how the U.S. was saying, "Oh no, we need to go into Suez crisis. Like, we need to go into Suez Canal and take it back because of communism." But actually, really, it was a very, very strategic trade port that they needed for quick oil access, right? So yeah, no, for the oil fields and stuff like that, number 2, if you've included that, that is the exact answer that I was kind of looking for. I think it was very much an ulterior motive to what the U.S. was doing at this time.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get to today's lecture. So we're going to kind of back up our timeline. So we kind of talked about this period, right? The détente. Okay, but we're going to go back a little bit to the peak point here. Can you guys read that?
Kind of.
Okay, let me just bring this in closer. A little bit better?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to back it up a little bit to the early 60s because really a lot happens during this time period. And there's going to be 4 things that I focus on, and the 2 of the things that are going to be related. But I want to talk about the period right before the détente, or the relaxing period between the U.S. and the USSR. So in 1961, the Soviet Union decides to build a wall around West Germany. Okay, you guys have heard about the Berlin Wall, I suspect, right? Yeah. So the reason that the Soviet Union does this is because within the last, I guess, 1945 to 61, okay, so right after World War II, where they say West Germany will be controlled by the capitalist economic policies, East Germany will be under the Soviet rule, and it will be under the communist economic policies, okay? And throughout that period, we're seeing this direct comparison between how well is the economic practices of capitalism performing when communist practices are directly put side by side against each other. And essentially what we're seeing by 1961 is that all of the economic advantages, all of the economic booms, all the money is happening in West Germany, okay? And actually East Germany, which is literally the same city, but just because of the economic practices are different, they're seeing that East Germany or East Berlin is dirt poor. Nobody wants to live there. So all of the intelligent businessmen, all of the artists, essentially anyone that has any economic desire is moving away from East Berlin and moving to West Berlin. Okay. And because this is an economic ideological war, right? The Cold War is two sides, the capitalists and the communists, trying to decide who's better. And right now in Berlin, communism is losing big time. And essentially, Khrushchev, okay, essentially the leader of the USSR at the time, gets really angry, saying, this is making us look really bad. Everyone is leaving East Berlin and moving to West Berlin. Okay, this is making communism look bad and USSR look bad. So they decide to build a wall around West Berlin. Okay, and this is when essentially one of the peak conflict points in our Cold War history. Okay, and what do you think? Okay, you guys don't have to have the answers, but what do you think is the reason why communism is failing at this time and capitalism is succeeding in such a small space that's together?
You said that capitalism is rising and communism is failing?
Yeah, in Berlin.
You know what? I have no. I know.
It's a difficult concept, but so let me try and explain it to you. So the idea of capitalism, as you know, it's the idea where we let the desires of the people, right? We let the invisible hand dictate what happens in the market. Okay. So if someone wants more, I don't know, if someone wants more cheese, then the system somehow is going to arrange itself. Someone's going to see the need for more cheese in that country and then bring in more cheese and make a lot of money doing it. Okay. So it's a natural, the way capitalists describe the invisible hand, the natural force that is run by what people want and people's desire to make money off of that want. Okay. They almost describe it as like a natural force. Okay. Almost like gravity is like a natural force. It just happens. Okay. But the downside to communism is it's a planned economy, meaning that there's someone at the top having to plan every single aspect of the economy. Okay. So if somebody wants more cheese in the economy, then the word has to get to that singular person that is planning the economy that, oh, it seems like people want cheese in my country. So therefore, they make economic policies towards bringing in more cheese, okay, rather than just letting it happen, okay? So communism has these extra steps, and considering how complicated economic policies are, it's so difficult for a person or a group of people just to plan for every possible scenario in what the economy is going to happen. But with capitalism, it's just a natural process. So it's way more efficient, it's faster, okay, and it encourages way more economic growth, okay? So trying to figure out how to control this natural force is communism, and it's very slow and it's very lagging behind capitalism. So naturally, okay, we even also talked about this, right? We talked about Vladimir Lenin when he rose to power. He said, we need to quickly mobilize the economy of Russia, and we can't do it with communism alone. We actually need to bring in a bit of capitalism to make sure that we industrialize faster. Okay. And do we have, just a quick question for you guys, do we have any purely communist countries in our society right now?
China? No.
No, China has aspects of capitalism in it. They have state-sponsored private corporations, so they had advantages, but still, at the end of the day, it's still a capitalist system.
Adson said North Korea.
North Korea might be the closest thing that we have to communism. I don't actually know the economic like the fine details of North Korea's economic policies, but I think North Korea might be the singular country that might run under communism. Now, do you know anything about whether or not North Korea's economy is doing well or if it's doing poorly?
I think it's in the middle, to be honest with you.
It's going pretty poorly. From what we know, there's generally a lot of, I think the people at the very top are doing very well. Like,
but there's a lot of corruption down. Like, there's no. Yeah.
So the people at the bottom are literally starving, and economically they're not doing very well. So the fact that eventually even the USSR, even the communist state of China actually give into capitalism, okay, is this is the starting point of the world realizing that capitalism, in terms of increasing a country's economic growth, is capitalism is the way. And that's why we see the Russian economy, we see the Chinese economy all integrate some form of capitalism in their economic policies. Okay. And the Berlin conflict is kind of the first time we really see it so close side by side. Okay. Before this period, I think the question was still up in the air whether communism was the best for the economy or capitalism was best for the economy. And this was kind of the first time we see, oh, capitalism is much better for the economy. Okay. So, let me just try and narrow things down for you. So yeah. So for question number 1 of our assignment, it's really asking you about how is this a representation of the ideological conflict between capitalism and communism? Okay. And really all you need to understand is that the building of the Berlin Wall is almost an admit of Khrushchev, okay, the leader of the USSR, kind of admitting defeat, not directly, but he is admitting defeat, that communism in the state of Berlin, or the country of Berlin, no, in the city of Berlin, okay, that communism is losing. And in the larger scale of things, that communism is losing to capitalism as an economic policy. So that's kind of what the big deal is for the Berlin Wall, the Berlin Wall going up. In terms of question number 2 and 3, they relate to some of the events that happened in Cuba during this time. So John F. Kennedy comes into power at this point, okay? And what's happening in Cuba is Fidel Castro, the communist revolutionary with Che Guevara, decides to rise up and bring communism into Cuba. Now, do you guys know where Cuba is in relations to the United States?
Oh, like, are they allies or not?
No, just like physically, do you know where Cuba is in terms of the United States?
Below?
Yeah, it is mostly south of most of the United States, but really, so you know how the state of Florida is like a peninsula? It's like a bit of land that sticks out at the bottom of the United States on the eastern portion.
Yeah.
So off the tip of Florida, okay, people can paddle boat. I mean, it's a difficult journey. It happens in the 80s, okay, where people can literally paddle boat from Cuba to Florida. It's like hundreds of kilometers. Okay, it's not even thousands. It's very, very close. I don't actually know how close it is, but it's very close. Okay, so the fact that Cuba, a country, an island nation so close to the United States, is turning towards communism, it's very, very scary for the American public at this point. And this is when the United States kind of freaks out, okay? Because remember, they have this policy in place. They have this policy in place talking about the domino principle, right? They're also talking about containment policy. They're saying we need to make sure that communism does not take over Europe by all means necessary and Asia by all means necessary. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, okay, independent of the communist movements in the USSR, independent of the movements in the communist movements of China, okay, these individual revolutionaries, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, decide we are going to rise up and take Cuba for communism, okay, without real support from USSR at all at this point. It's the opposite of monolithic communism. And essentially the US's reaction for it is, we can't have this. Let's send in our troops and let's try and put down Fidel Castro's rebellion. Okay, and this is when the Bay of Pigs happens, where essentially the U.S. it gets taken out by Cuban forces. Okay, so they land on a beach, okay, known as the Bay of Pigs, and essentially they just lose, so they have to back out. And as we know, okay, Fidel Castro rises. He's successful. He takes over Cuba, and communism reigns in Cuba. And the events that follow is probably the closest point that we have ever gotten to actually starting a nuclear war in our world. Okay. Up here, I write that we were literally inches away from starting nuclear war, and that is 100% true. We were literally inches away from starting nuclear war, because essentially what happened was USSR had this gift of having, Cuba becoming a communist nation just kind of fall in their laps. They didn't plan it. They didn't really have anything to do with it. Okay. But having a country so close to the United States means that they're also able to move their nuclear warheads close to the United States. Okay. Because during this time, remember, United States have allies all throughout Europe. So the Soviet Union has had missiles pointed at them from places like France, okay, from places like Great Britain, where it's considerably closer. You don't have to cross an ocean with a missile to get it over to Russia, okay? But at this point now, Russia also has the same. So they move a bunch of nuclear missiles, to literally the coast of Florida, and the United States, okay, specifically John F. Kennedy has to react to this. Okay. So what he does is he sends out essentially the entire US military fleet, the Navy fleet, out around the island of Cuba, and says, crossing this line with your missiles means that you are starting war. Okay. And during this process, this is when we literally come inches from starting nuclear war, meaning that there was at one point a nuclear submarine that held, essentially nuclear bombs in the submarine. Okay. It was on Russia's side, where they lost communication and they thought that they had heard the signal to launch a nuclear warhead when there was no such signal. And one of the, essentially the people in the nuclear submarine said, well, if we press this, we know that we're going to start a nuclear war. I'm not comfortable with doing this, so I won't do this. So he actually goes against what they believe to be direct order from the USSR, and they don't actually press the button. And if that one guy would have said, all right, let's do this, let's press the button, we literally might be in a completely different future where all-out nuclear war might have happened because of Cuba turning to a communist nation. Okay, so that's how close we were during this time. And that's really why that we're at this point, okay, in Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, okay? That's why we're at the first peak of our Cold War period, okay? We're very, very close. We were literally inches away from being in a nuclear war, okay? And this kind of John F. Kennedy comes up with essentially a term, okay, describing why we should not participate anymore in direct threats of nuclear war. And this is called the mutually assured destruction. People understand that if one person, either the US or the USSR, presses the button, then literally everyone will die. Okay, that's what mutually assured destruction means, or MAD. Okay, and that kind of takes over the relationship between the USSR and the United States for a long time, where they kind of stopped talking about, I mean, they're still building nuclear bombs, but they kind of stopped talking about the possibility of them actually using it. Okay. And that kind of leads into sort of into this period of détente. Okay, along with the Vietnam syndrome, we also have this concept of mutually assured destruction. So therefore, let's not be idiots and let's get away from the nuclear missile buttons. Let's just back away. Let's relax and let's calm down for a bit. Okay. And as that happens, I mean, obviously the USSR is a little unstable. So Khrushchev, who was kind of involved in dealing with the Cuban Missile Crisis, okay, he's the guy that took over directly after Joseph Stalin died, okay, and he gets kind of overthrown by a guy named Brezhnev, okay, so it goes from Stalin, Khrushchev, and Brezhnev. I know Russian names are kind of confusing, but essentially he takes over and he says, actually, let's intensify things a little bit, not directly against the United States. In fact, he actually kind of bridges gaps of communication between the United States and the USSR, but they become more aggressive in dealing with the countries around them. So he comes up with this idea called the Brezhnev Doctrine. And essentially, it states that any country that goes against communism is liable to be invaded by us. Okay, so if you are a communist nation and you decide to back away, okay, then Russia has the right to invade your country with their military and bring you back into the communist fold, essentially. Okay, so the last question in the assignment talks about, can you compare the Brezhnev Doctrine, okay, to the United States' containment policy, right, the Marshall Plan, and the domino effect principle? Okay, so all I really want you to do for the last question is, what is the similarities? What are the differences? And really, are we seeing this war continue on as an ideological war, or is this something more of a modern economic imperialism? You guys know what imperialism is?
No, I don't know what it is.
Okay, so imperialism is essentially when a larger country, this happened kind of around World War I. Actually, World War I was caused by imperialism. Okay, all these rich European nations decided to invade smaller, poorer countries. Like there was a period known as the Scramble for Africa, which is one of the biggest examples of imperialism, where Europeans essentially kicked down the front door of all of the different African nations and said, we have a bigger military, we're in charge now, and all of your natural resources actually belong to us. Okay. And what the Cold War essentially is being criticized for sometimes is essentially, isn't that what the US and the USSR are doing? We're seeing the US go into Egypt, right, to get access to the oil, right? And they're saying, we don't want Egypt, we don't want the Suez Canal to fall into communist hands, okay? And the USSR is invading neighboring countries and saying, no, we're invading because communism is good and you are straying from communism. It is our job to protect you against capitalism. But really, they need the land, they need the resources. So what it's saying is they're using the excuse of, let's protect our ideologies in this battle of ideologies, but really what their main purpose is to gain economic advantage by controlling more nations, essentially. Okay, that's what I mean by imperialism. So just give me examples as to why you think that the US and the USSR is essentially not necessarily thinking about ideology at this point, but really thinking about economic gains. Okay, what are they trying to really benefit out of this?
Economic gains. I know they have massive military, maybe to try and expand it even more.
Yeah, I mean, what do you really have to, when you take over a country, right? If you have, say, you take over just any country, right? And you put your desired leader, you have a leader put in place that you know you have the control of, right? Essentially, you have the military of that nation kind of, available for you to use in future conflicts. So yeah, expansion of their military is a huge thing that they're after at this point. Okay. So that's kind of all you really need to understand. You just need to understand that the Berlin Wall going up, okay? You need to understand the conflict that happened because of Cuba moving into communism, okay? And then lastly, you need to understand what Brezhnev does and why he begins invading other countries in the name of conserving communism in the region, if that makes sense. So really, I'm just only need you guys to think about 3 main ideas, okay? And that's really the entire assignment.
Okay.
Do you guys have any questions?
I'm all good.
Yeah, I'm good too.
Okay. I'll let you guys go. I will post this in a few minutes, hopefully here. And I'm going to actually just stop the recording here.